Okay, so this is the second part of our video series, so to speak. We're going to be talking now about managing differences on your leadership team and in the workplace more generally. There are a lot of differences that you're going to have to navigate throughout your career, and we're going to target most specifically the Myers-Briggs typology or type, which is indicative of your personality. By the way, my voice is low because my daughter is in the other room, and I'm trying to be quiet for her. What are some of the ways in which people differ? We think of many, many differences, some of which include gender, race, religious preference, sexual orientation, educational level, all sorts of things that are different about people, work styles, personality among them. So there are many different things that you're going to have to navigate, national differences or national culture differences. In terms of thinking about your preferences, here are some just general questions about people's personalities. So, number one, in your opinion, does nature or nurture best account for variations in people's personality? The science of it is, well, we don't know. There are debates about that all the time, but I think it will be a perennial debate, and some people believe that it's strongly nurture, some others believe it's strongly nature, and I think that most psychologists and other specialists in answering these questions would probably say, or this question would probably say, it's both. Think of a few personality traits. What influenced the formation of those traits? E.g., I got my outgoing nature from my mom, or I get my temper from my mom. Can people's personalities change? If so, when and why? The science of this is suggestive that people's personalities don't change very much after adolescence. And if they do, it would have to be something very dramatic. And then the question can become, well, is it possible that what happened was so dramatic that the person's real personality is just masked, like in PTSD? Excuse me, I had to get a sip of water. On the Myers-Briggs, people can find their personalities can change over time. I've had a lot of people say that theirs has not changed at all over time, and some have said, well, mine changed a little bit, and the reason for that is, as we'll discuss, the percentages that you get on your MBTI signal the strength of your preference, and if you only have a slight preference, which is generally indicated by a smaller number, something below about 22, then you answered most of the questions, or roughly half and half for one preference or the other, with a few questions in one camp, which is why you got a slight preference. So it doesn't mean you lean toward one particular area or way of doing things. Do you believe that the MBTI doesn't reflect your personality? I've rarely had somebody say that. I have found that mine is very, very smartly spot on, and once you know more about the MBTI, you can actually look around at the people you interact with and start to guess what their MBTI type would be. The MBTI is actually the most widely used self-assessment instrument in the workplace today. So if this is the first time that you've taken it, you probably will take it again at some point in time. The MBTI is only capturing certain elements of people's personality, and there are others. There's the big 5 personality dimensions, which capture at least one dimension as an overlap, and some aren't. So I asked, do you resent being summed up by a survey test, or in particular the MBTI test? And you know what? I could totally appreciate why somebody might be. Given the complexity of human beings, this is not doing more than it says it is, which is getting you on 4 dimensions. But we're very complex, and surveys are only able to catch certain facets of us. Okay, so what this means is there are 8 preferences: extroversion, introversion, intuitive sensing, thinking, feeling, and judging, perceiving. And those are 8 different preferences. Now, if you have a preference, that means you prefer to act in certain ways. What does the MBTI help you to understand? A lot of different stuff. It can help you understand preferences of others as well as yourself. And what you'll find from our discussion is that the MBTI can help you understand strengths and weaknesses, because if you're heavily extroverted, for example, there are actually weaknesses associated with that as well as strengths. So it can highlight for you some things you have to work on in some areas where you're particularly strong. And it's important because it can, frankly, facilitate better communication in the workplace and can lead to better teaming, fewer conflicts. The Myers-Briggs is used in a lot of workforces to help build leadership teams and project teams, and on the general premise that it can really help people to work better together. Now, by the way, the Myers-Briggs is not without some critics, although it's widely used in business schools. So let me just say the most common critique of the Myers-Briggs is its, quote, reliability factor, which means that on scientific studies, people have taken the Myers-Briggs and then taken it again over time and gotten a different result. And I think you just have to take these with a grain of salt. If you believe that they fit you and have value, wonderful. If you think another personality test might better suit you, then that's fine too. I would say that given the pervasiveness of the Myers-Briggs, it is a good thing for you to know about it, regardless of your feelings about how well it fits you. One thing that I've done over time is guessed and had my loved one guess the personality types of my loved ones, and actually had them take the test and have been dead on. So, for example, about a year ago, I actually guessed my in-laws' personality types and had them take it after the fact and was right. And the key is that's why this has value, because you can start to realize how people prefer to act and accommodate them / navigate or negotiate the differences between you. Okay, so how to think about the results and not. Do realize that you prefer behaving in certain ways based on your results or that are reflective in your results. But don't use this as a crutch. So you can't go around to your significant other and say, hey, this is just how I am. This is my personality. Rather, we can choose to behave in different ways. So as an example, a colleague of mine who is at the University of Michigan, he and I went to abroad together on a Boston University International Management Program trip. And he was very, very engaged with everybody after hours, after class. And I said, well, Andy, you must be an extrovert. And he said, no, I'm actually an introvert, moderate one, but I choose to behave as an extrovert because I believe that's what will make me a successful academic. So you can behave in a manner inconsistent with your type. And once again, remember that the MBTI is only one measure of personality. There are other means of measurement, and our personalities are very complex. Surveys can only capture a certain amount about us. Now, in terms of introversion, extroversion, I'll actually skip this in terms of just doing anything but going over these 4 questions. When I've done this in class, which is most of the time, I have people talk about introversion and extroversion and what they think are some of the positive qualities of their own and the other's preference, and then ask questions of each other. Now, the big thing in relation to extroversion, introversion is where you get your energy. And the key is that extroverts gain their energy from the environment, from social situations, and get stimulation from outside within. So the idea is, how do you recharge your batteries? That's really the big question. And extroverts tend to recharge their batteries by being around other people. So when they're wiped out at the end of the day, they may well get on the phone and call somebody, or actually choose to go out and be among a reasonable sized group, whereas introverts tend to want to recharge their batteries by consolidating within themselves, and by being alone, having some be alone time, or by being with one or two close others. Excuse me. So the idea is that in the extroverted attitude, the essential and stimulations from the environment, attention flowing outward to people and objects. And for introverts, the stimulation is from within oneself, and the focus is on the inner world of thoughts and reflections. Now, excuse me, I'm a little bit short of breath. The other difference is how people respond to stimuli in the environment. So when extroverts get stimuli, the talking part of the brain starts working before the thinking part of the brain does. So extroverts, they know what they think when they hear what they say, and they will often interrupt people. Often they'll make statements and start to, they'll think divergently and fine-tune what they're saying as they start to think about it. Whereas if you talk to an introvert, you are likely to get a pregnant pause and then a very cohesive statement, because when presented with a stimulus in the environment, the thinking part of the brain lights up slightly before the talking part. So one advantage that introverts actually have is this idea that they will never want to put their foot in their mouths. Now, once again, remember, this is all strength of preference. If you're very strong preference, you may want to go out all the time to recharge your batteries. You may love being around big groups of people. Whereas if you're strongly introverted, you may want your more alone time than most. However, we're on a continuum. So if you have a slight preference, then it may well be that you could go either way on any given day or any given moment. And the idea is that we try to keep ourselves at the same level of stimulation over time. Now, one of the things that people ask about with introversion and extroversion is, are there advantages conferred to extroverts in today's team-based work environment? And some have made the arguments that yes, they do have that, but we have found that introverts are just as likely as extroverts to rise to the highest positions in, quote, society, political positions of power, and businesses, and they have advantages as well. For one is this idea that they will think very smartly. They are very aware, more self-aware than extroverts tend to be, and because they can be alone for longer periods of time, tend to have the capability to focus on tasks that require a lot of focus in order to become proficient. So there are some advantages for introverts. So extroverts, they tend to be energized by other people. They rely on the environment for stimulation and guidance. They can be action-oriented because they're drawn to so many different things and tend to enjoy social situations and relationships. Introverts tend to be energized by the inner world of ideas. They rely more on principles and concepts than external environments. They are thoughtful, and they don't mind solitude and privacy. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here and we'll go on to another one.